So, a story is told, and it's about a chief, a local chief in Africa, somewhere in Africa, in probably, say, the 1600s. Colonialism hadn't happened, at least not, north of Zambezi. We were still up here, living in harmony, fighting over livestock, the usual stuff that people were doing in the 1500s. And this chief was a chief of a small village. He was doing okay. He had these people, but he kept getting terrorized by this little other village that was across the valley, and they'd keep raiding him and killing his people and taking their cattle, and it was really getting on his last nerve. But he couldn't figure out what to do because these guys were better armed, they were more than him, they were bigger. God knows what those guys used to eat. He couldn't find a way to get these guys. So one day, he goes to see the local witch doctor. This guy was his soothsayer, He'd say things that would soothe him. But he had a plan. Being a witch doctor with experience, understanding the gravity of the situation, he came up with an idea. He used his immense powers to create a magic potion. And the magic potion was supposed to make anybody who applied it on themselves completely invisible. And this worked really, really well for the chief, because it meant that his warriors could get into that village, decimate that entire army, and take back what these guys have been stealing from him and his people for years. And these guys wouldn't even know what hit them. So the chief gave his soldiers instructions. They went to the witch doctor. They had this stuff applied to them, but they had to take off all their clothes, because it would be a bit spooky if clothes kept walking into the enemy's camp, right? That's a warning sign, clothes just floating through the air. So, okay, skins. Back then, they didn't quite wear the kind of stuff we wear now. So the instructions were very clear. Carry no weapons, because you're invisible. You just go over there and take those guys' weapons. Wear nothing, because we don't them to see us coming. That whole point of invisibility would be lost. Loincloth walking through the village, not a good idea. And based on this just very simple instructions, they marched into war. Not a stitch, not a hair on them, foreign hair, animal hair on them. And the end of the story is there were a lot of naked, dead soldiers that day, and a whole lot of others running for their dear lives. This objective, this pursuit for invisibility was not just happening on the continent of Africa. It's been happening across the eons, with different generations, different societies, trying to find a way of being invisible to the human eye. We see it in our science fiction with Star Trek and the cloaking technology. We see it in Harry Potter with the cloak of invisibility. And I know these are contemporary stories, but if you go back in time, you'll find amulets, you'll find coats, you'll find magic potions that have superpowers that make you invisible. It's been the pursuit of mankind for a long time. Sad thing is, while we've been working so hard to find a way of becoming invisible or making people disappear, we actually had done it all along. You see, we, in most parts of Africa right now, don't know where the vast majority of our people are. We don't know where they're being born, who's being born, how many are being born. We don't know who's dying. We don't know where they are. We don't know why they're dying. And a lot of this data is collected by what we call our civil registration and vital statistics systems. And the coverage of our CRVS, as it's known for short, is terrible. Only maybe 12 countries on the continent have a 90% coverage of birth registration. Another 8, sorry about that. 8 countries have a similar 90% coverage or thereabouts for death registration. I saw recent estimates that say that we have about 55% of children born in sub-Saharan Africa whose births aren't registered. 55%. That's millions of children over the last 8 to 10 years. It means we've made them invisible, because as long as they don't exist in the data, no resources will be allocated for their services. So allocation of resources for schools, for healthcare, for infrastructure, it will take a very long time for for policymakers to realize just how pressing an issue is, just to realize how pressing the need is for a specific service in a specific place. The alternative to CRVS is to wait until your census is done. Now, census, as you know, are done every 10 years. Every 10 years. So 6 years down the line, our policymakers, our researchers, our academics, NGOs are using data that is multi-year old to come up with the guesstimates for how fast the population is growing and where and what shape it is. So CRVS, by international standards, is supposed to be continuous. It's supposed to be permanent. It's supposed to be universal in the way that it collects data on people's events and the characteristics of those events across time. And because it's compulsory, it means that the state collects this data and has it. And with it, it can make a lot of decisions that can be made much, much faster. And unfortunately, if we have to wait 10 years, really, 4 years after that census, we're using old information to make decisions that affect the livelihoods and the quality of life of millions and millions of people across Africa. So check up your country's CRVS. What's the coverage? If it's not good, if it's below 90% for births, for deaths, even for civil events like marriages, take it up with your government. Let's do something. If you want to stay subscribed to some of the things that I rant about, somewhere here is a subscribe button. Promise it won't hurt. Click, and I'll see you soon.